On now to the showdown over automatic tax hikes and spending cuts that are going to hit Americans beginning January 1st if Congress and the White House don't act. Yesterday, President Obama seemed to suggest that Republicans are playing hardball with him for personal reasons.
It is very hard for them to say yes to me. But, you know, at some point, you know, they've got to take me out of it and think about their voters and think about what's best for the country. And if they do that, if they're not worried about who's winning and who's losing, you know, did they score a point on the president? Did they extract that last little concession? Did they force him to do something he really doesn't want to do, just for the heck of it? And they focus on actually what's good for the country. I actually think we can get this done.
Some critics now suggesting that is, quote, narcissistic and unnecessarily dismissive of the other side's genuine policy disagreements. Joining me now is Simon Rosenberg, president and founder of NDN, a think tank and advocacy organization, also former campaign advisor to President Clinton, and Mark Thiessen, a fellow at the American Enterprise Institute and a former speechwriter for President George W. Bush. Let me start with you on this, Simon. Why impugn the motives of the other side? Is that the best way to get them to agree with you or to reach a deal, that they only are standing their ground because they're worried about who's winning and who's losing? Did they score a point on the president, force him to do something he really doesn't want to do just for the heck of it, instead of focusing on what's good for the country?
I think there's been some harsh words on both sides in the last couple of days. I think there's a lot of frustration that I think John Boehner and Barack Obama have tried hard to get to a deal. They're close, but they're not there. And I think there's a lot of frustration in Washington right now, and there's a lot of worry and fear that we may not be able to close the gap between the two parties and that we could end up going over the cliff, and a lot of people's holidays are going to get ruined, and a lot of bad stuff could happen early next year. So I think this is all part of, Megan, it's all part of these endgame negotiations, and I'm still hopeful that the two sides can come together and get this done, before we all get out of here.
Back when I was practicing law and we had to do negotiations to settle cases and so on, I can say personally I found it unproductive when you would insult the other side at the end when things got tough and frustrating, when you would sort of say, you're really a bad person because you just don't want what's good. You just hate me, and that's why you're maintaining that position. I mean, as a negotiation tactic, is this effective, Mark?
No, it's not. I mean, first of all, it doesn't occur to this president that it's not about him, that Republicans may actually believe that raising taxes is bad for the country as a matter of principle. But moreover, the idea that they're playing hardball is absurd. They've capitulated. They've given him what he wanted. I mean, during the campaign, the real question is, why can't Barack Obama say yes to John Boehner? During the campaign, he said over and over and over again, his goal was to, quote, make sure millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share, unquote. Well, John Boehner has agreed to raise tax rates, which was his insistence, on millionaires and billionaires. Why can't Obama say yes? I mean, the Senate Democrats have. In 2010, 53 Senate Democrats voted for a bill by Senator Chuck Schumer to extend all the Bush tax cuts for everyone making less than $1 million. Senator Schumer said that he believed the $1 million was the best line. Senator Claire McCaskill came on and said that's a great compromise.
Yeah, but the Democrats, Mark, are saying now, why can't the Republicans sign on to that?
Because we have the Republicans. That's what they're doing. They've agreed raise tax rates.
But they didn't back then.
For everyone making. Sorry?
But they didn't.
We opposed it. I mean, the Republicans are against doing that. But the point is, Boehner has made a concession on principle. I would say he's capitulated on principle. And Barack Obama sitting around on the press conference saying he's insisting on 100%. He's capitulated. Okay. This was the Buffett rule, the millionaire's tax.
I want to ask you, Simon, because Charles Krauthammer went on special report. He's the one who used that term narcissistic last night. And he said, I think he would take issue with your characterization of it being sort of an end game frustration. He seemed to think that the president is more systematic in this attitude. Let's listen to what he said.
He talks about the other side as being unprincipled, not interested in the national interest, slaves of ideology, which he says makes no sense, and, as you mentioned, invested in opposing him to the point where they're willing to let the country suffer. There's no reason he can't either avoid that or give some credit to the other side for sincerity in just seeing a different way to approach the crisis the country has.
Your thoughts?
I think the president was expressing frustration because, as Mark pointed out, that the Republicans have given, and so have the Democrats. I mean, what is in the final offer that the president has just given to John Boehner, which has been rejected, was substantial cuts in Medicare and Social Security, substantial cuts in domestic spending, and Barack Obama agreed to the main thing that John Boehner wanted, which was an equal amount of cuts and tax increases, which is very different from the president's original proposal. So the president feels that he's gone more than halfway, that he's met the request from John Boehner, and that when he finally put a deal on the table, right, that John Boehner walked away because he couldn't get his own caucus his own conference to go along with it. So,
but
Megan,
you see that Boehner has compromised as well. He didn't want.
No, I agree. Both sides have given. Both sides have given, and I think the president feels. That's Mark. Come on. I mean, both sides have given. Mark, you've been on this show with me where you've told me that Democrats would never agree to entitlement cuts, and there are substantial entitlement cuts in this deal.
They're not substantial entitlement cuts.
We also went to a 1-to-1 ratio. We gave in on
no,
major
it's not a 1-to-1
here,
ratio. He's demanding 1.3. Simon, you're wrong. He's demanding $1.3 trillion in new revenues, and he's offered $850 billion in spending cuts. That's about
wait, let Mark respond. Let Mark get in on the discussion. Mark,
two.
I'm sorry, hold on, wait.
Hold on.
No, Simon,
hold on.
Simon.
So I'll just finish that. I think the frustration.
Not helpful. Not
Simon,
helpful.
can you
stop?
Simon?
This drives the viewers nuts. It's my job to stop you guys from doing that.
Okay.
I'm giving the floor to Mark.
Thank you.
I'll get you back in, Simon.
Okay, don't worry.
He started out, the plan he campaigned on was roughly $800 billion in revenues. After Boehner conceded that on the first day after the election, he raised it to $1.6 trillion in revenues and now has scaled it back to 1.3. That's not a concession. On entitlements, it changed CPI, the change in adjustment and means testing, which is what he's agreed to in principle, that's not a Republican idea. That's a bipartisan proposal that's been put forward by people on both sides. That doesn't do anything to change the structure. That's just kicking the can down the road. Those are not major concessions. Republicans have conceded a major principle. They oppose raising taxes on anyone, and they have agreed to Obama's Buffett rule, his millionaire's tax. What has Obama conceded in principle? Name one principle he's conceded, Simon.
The latest deal that the president offered John Boehner was 1-to-1 in spending cuts and tax increases. Mark's just wrong about this, and he's got to do a little homework next time before he comes on the show. And the second
Speaker
thing
Boehner's office gave you the numbers this morning.
The second thing is, this is what the president has said, and the second thing is that they have conceded. They said Social Security was off the table. It's on the table. Both sides believe, Megan, getting back to your negotiations, both sides feel that they've given. I think we're very close to getting a deal, and I hope that in the next few days they can come together and get it done. It would be the right thing for the country.
Touching Social Security
there, if you're close and you might have a deal, that's the time for a little wooing. It's the time for a little wooing, not the time for you suck. That just never worked for me. Anyway, we'll see. But I wound up choosing a different profession. Guys, thank you.
Thanks, Megan.
Thanks, Megan.
Well, we have new developments in the investigation.